Yes, folks, you got Harrington here. I'm still in Spain. The reason is that the injury I told you about last week, it was more serious than we knew. I had to have some surgery, so I'm just waiting for the doc to take out the stitches and give me the okay to fly. But enough about that. I want to talk to you guys today about litigation, and don't wrinkle up your nose. Look, we're not going to get super technical. I'm going to do that next week when I get into depositions. But for today, we're going to keep it kind of light. We're going to talk a little bit philosophically, and I do believe whether you're a real estate investor or somebody else who maybe doesn't get involved in a lot of litigation, you're going to find this interesting. So let's do it. Our Practice Makes Perfect is the podcast for business owners and real estate investors, siempre con un cariño especial para los clientes extranjeros. Part one. Okay, let's wax philosophical here for a second. So what prevents our modern day society from being the Wild West? Some people would say religion, some people would say the law. I would say, in this regard at least, those two things are basically the same, right? It comes down to rules, right? I mean, we all know history, so without rules, then, who's in charge? Well, the strongest person, or the best sword fighter, or the guy with the quickest gun. I mean, that's the way it works, right? Now, how is this relevant to you? Well, the same is true with business. We know there are sharks out there, and they will just do whatever they want, and the ones with the biggest pockets or they have a huge advantage. Now, we could certainly debate as to whether or not the system works as well as it's supposed to, but there's no doubt that the business bullies, the strong men, the laws are designed to keep them somewhat in check. Let me give you one famous example you've probably heard of, and then we'll bring it down to our level. But you guys know about the whole McDonald's coffee scandal. You remember the lady burned herself and then recovered, I don't know, some ungodly amount of money. And everybody thought that was ridiculous. That was an absolute travesty of the law. Seinfeld even made fun of it. I'm not here to convince you one way or the other, but let me at least make you aware that that wasn't the first time that McDonald's had faced such a lawsuit. It wasn't the first time McDonald's had been told to lower the temperature of the coffee because it was unreasonably hot. McDonald's had made the business decision to defy the courts and just keep paying these settlements because using the hotter temperature allowed them to buy cheaper beans. Apparently it opens you get better aroma out of it. And so it was just a business decision for them. Now, McDonald's, that's your business bully, right? Huge corporation. What are you to do as a judge when you've told this company many times to do something? They're just simply defying you, and it makes good business sense for them to continue defying you. What do? Well, and you have to punish them, and you have to punish them with a large enough fine, a penalty that it changes the economics, right? They have to rethink their behavior because it's no longer worth it. Now, what does this have to do with you? Okay, let's make that our next section. Part two. Okay, punitive damages are a thing. That's how, McDonald's ended up with this huge verdict against them. And it could happen to you, right? I mean, it is a thing. It doesn't happen very often, though. I mean, it doesn't happen very often at our level, right? We're not huge corporations. We're small business owners and real estate investors. And so at our level, it's not likely to come up that often. But the equivalent is still there in the form of attorney's fees. Why do I say that? Well, think like a McDonald's executive, all right? What do you have to lose by just breaching a contract, for example? Just doing whatever it is you want to do. If the only consequence is that you go through the lawsuit, you lose, and then you just have to pay or respect, the provision. You're just back to doing what you were supposed to do anyway. What do you have to lose? How is that enough of a deterrent for you to, not just go frontier style, just do whatever you want? If the worst that can happen is that you end up having to do what you were supposed to do, go for it. There's going to be a percentage of times you get away with it. Well, the reason is that if you go through a lawsuit and lose, you may be faced with punitives. That could happen. But even if you're not, then you're very likely going to end up having to pay the other side's legal fees and costs. And then at our level, that then changes the analysis. Okay, now that I've decided to open that topic, I'm going to have to do a little aside here and explain to you that the United States is the opposite of the rest of the world, or at least as much of the world legal systems as I'm aware of. Here in Spain, for example, as in all of Europe that I'm aware of, it's for all the marbles, right? Whoever wins the case also wins the attorney's fees and the cost of the litigation from the non-prevailing side. So for most of the world, they have that built-in disincentive for people to, just break the rules. Because they know that if they go through a lawsuit and lose, not only are they going to have to pay the judgment for whatever amount they were supposed to have paid initially, but they're also going to have to pick up the extra costs that the other side incurred by having to go through the lawsuit. Not so in the United States. In fact, they call it the American rule because unless there is a statute or a contractual provision that provides for legal fees. Both sides have to bear their own costs and fees. And now that I went there, I got to do one more aside. Apologies, I told you I wasn't going to get too technical, but I do want to be accurate. There is one carve out. There's something called an offer of judgment or a settlement proposal. There's a particular rule, at least in Florida, that you can make a proposal, and if it's not accepted and then you go on to win the case, I'm simplifying things, then you can recover your attorney's fees and costs as well. That is a long way around for me to say that at the end of the day, attorney's fees and costs can be put in play even in our American system, and it can incentivize people to not break the rules. Part 3. Now, all that I just said was to make this one point, which is litigation is important. Maybe I should say dispute resolution is important, because arbitration, litigation, all that goes together. Mediation, even in some cases. If you're a business owner, you know what I'm talking about. You already know that that's important. I don't have to convince you. If you're a real estate investor, maybe your world is more transactional. Maybe it doesn't come up that much. You got to evict a few tenants along the way, but maybe it's less important to you. But my point is this: it underlies everything we do. I think in law school, one of the definitions I heard of power is the ability to make somebody do something they don't want to do. Well, you guys are out there, you know what I'm talking about. There are going to be disputes. There are going to be things that you want to see happen that, you want to try to make happen. And, where do you get that power? Where do you get your leverage? How do you get things done in the business world? Happily, for the time being at least, you don't just grab a stick and go, take care of business that way. The modern day equivalent is dispute resolution, right? The threat of litigation. Sometimes you actually get into the lawsuit, but even if that doesn't happen, it's the threat. It's the knowing what would happen if you were to end up in a lawsuit. Whether you're conscious of it or not, that underlies everything that we do in business, right? The threat of litigation and what would happen if there were to be a lawsuit. That's where the leverage comes from. And of course, that's why people like me have a job. We know the laws very well. We know how to put you in a position where you can use the laws to your advantage. And then that, of course, gives you leverage and a huge leg up in field. That's what I got for you guys today. I've done this episode really, well, hopefully you found it interesting, but also because I want to justify the fact that I am going to go a little bit further into the weeds. In the next upcoming 2 episodes, we're going to be talking about depositions, and I wanted you to understand the reason why these things matter to you, even if you're not somebody who ends up in litigation very often. Please do the honorable thing down there. I will be back in town next week. I just got to get these stitches out of my leg. Recuerda, como siempre, que hablamos español, and I will talk to you guys very soon.